Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and in this next video, we're going to be continuing on with this whole authentication authorization thing. The next thing we're going to do is create a logout, the ability to log out, and then set up our ability to do users. Now this is actually the second or maybe even third time I've been recording this video. Had some technical issues the first couple of times, so some of the code's already kind of written out. We'll still go over it. And then for some reason I made the really bad decision of changing to a green shirt. So I do look like a disembodied head at the moment. But we'll go with it. I'm wearing a green Star Wars t-shirt if you're curious as to why I am invisible or a disembodied head at the moment. But yeah, so basically first things first, I'll kind of go over the things that we did in my previous attempts at recording this video. So basically, we'll still need to create sort of the log out route, so we'll do that separately. But, which actually we can do real quick. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into, because we did the scaffolding of the auth, that default scaffolding. So that means I do have this controller called these auth controllers right here. So I'm going to put in my home controller. And then in this controller, this I ended up doing, I think, in the you can see there's a controller that kind of goes with the different files that it created. So what I did in here is I sat there and I created a init method for this home controller class that ends up giving us the view, the request, the authorization piece, the response object, the session object. We actually really don't need the session object, but it's there. I got it, so you can kind of see how everything I imported right here. And again, all this code will be in the repo that's linked to in the video description, so you can refer to it. Okay, cool. So essentially what I was going to do is we're going to be able to actually have to-dos that are attached to your user. So what we did is we created a migration. Okay, so I did like Python, Python craft migrate create to-dos, the table, and then they did like dash create to-dos to create a to-dos migration, which you can see right over. Let's go to that first, just kind of walk through all these steps again. So I created the migration. Okay, and then looking at the documentation for the ORM, which again is right over here, we determined that, hey, I want to create an ID field, because typically the way it works is each to-do belongs to a particular user. So generally when something belongs to something else, so like let's say every photo belongs to a user or whatnot, that's going to be called a one-to-many relationship, a belongs to relationship. So the thing that it belongs to needs to have its own what's called a foreign key field, meaning a field that tracks the ID number of the thing it belongs to. Okay, and the reason why it's called a foreign key is because this foreign key represents the primary key of the thing it belongs to at its own table. So here in the to-dos table, there's a user ID for each to-do, and using that user ID, we can then go search the users table for the user that to-do belongs to. So we create the integer field that represents the field where we track the ID, and then we create this foreign key field. And the benefit of that, of designating it as a foreign key, is that that's actually going to allow the database to make sure that if we add a integer, like we add, say, hey, this to-do belongs to this user, that number has to match one of the existing users. Okay, can't match some user that it doesn't exist. So it gives us that little prevention of just me saying, hey, assign it to user 10, and there is no user 10. So that's what this is. Okay, so in my migration, this is just, again, a string for message, whatnot. So we ran those migrations. I already ran those migrations. Okay. Then I also kind of went over the user migration. So again, there's a user migration already. And that's all there already set up. I think I already talked about this in the previous video. Okay, but just basically the way that works. And then what we had to do is that once we created the migration, we created the table, we need to create the to-do model. So I did Python craft model to-do. Okay, and that created the to-do model, which was located in app models here to-do. Now, what we want to do is in the model, we want to designate these relationships so that way we can take advantage of them if we need to. So basically, since every to-do belongs to a user, we import this belongs to decorator from Masonite ORM.relationships, and basically I can decorate a method of the to-do model. So I create this function which is decorated with belongs to. So whenever you do like this at something, that's called decorating. Okay, what you're doing is really you're passing this function to this belongs to function, which then turns out a modified version of the function. All you need to know is that essentially this makes the relationship possible. So essentially what's going to happen is that this belongs to takes in the ID, which means it's saying, hey, the to-do's ID, so the ID on the to-do model or on the individual to-do from the to-do's table, it's going to, or basically, technically, this should be the ID of the user should line up with the user ID on the to-do. Okay, and then what we do is we return this user model. And basically what's going to do is that when we return the user model in this method, because it's decorated by the belongs to function, it's going to create a property that basically says, okay, let me go find the particular user where this is true, these two things match, and let me make that the user. Okay, so now when I have a to-do, I can be like, hey, this to-do.user, and actually have that user object. And then you do the same thing in the user. So the user can have many or has many to-dos, so we import the has many decorator. So what I'm saying here is that, hey, this to-do has many user IDs, so take the user ID and match it up against any to-do that has the same number in their user ID field. And then that's the many to-dos that this user has. So we define the function, we return the to-do model, and basically it'll then query that and add it to this property called to-dos in the function. So essentially that's kind of how that works. Okay. So that created the properties. Okay, and then again, these fields are just to configure the model. It's in the documentation, but basically this makes sure that this field is particularly encrypted with bcrypt. This makes sure that these fields can be used using like form data, and then the auth piece is so you can, which field is sort of the unique field that identifies like different users. Okay, so that was done there. And then what I did, again, this was in the previous attempt at recording this video, that unfortunately my computer froze at the end of it. Very tragic. Okay, now if I go over to controllers, auth, home controller, basically this is the method, right? So basically all the controllers that handle all those auth routes are right here. So if you wanted to customize those auth routes, they're right here. So what I did is I customized the home route, the route that actually sends you to the home. Okay, I changed that so that way it goes and grabs the user's to-do. So you can see here what happens is I check if the user is logged in. So I'm saying, okay, hey, let me go grab the logged in user. Now if the user is false, meaning there is no logged in user because the user hasn't logged in, just send them back to the login page. Otherwise, go use the user ID because you get back a dictionary, and then go grab me the actual user object. Okay, so then this represents the user object, and then I'm using this to-dos property to get all the to-dos for that user. This is like the add to-dos function that would be like, oh, if you add, you submit the form, it'll make a post request, and it'll trigger this, where again it checks if the user's logged in. So I grab the user, check, hey, is the user false? Because if the user is false, that means you're not logged in. And then I send you back to the login page if that's the case. I go grab the message from the input from the form, and I check to see the user ID on the user who's logged in, because we grab the user object up here. And then I create a new to-do and then send you back to the home page. Okay, so those are those two routes. I need to add one more. Def logout self. Okay, I do need to grab the user. So I'll just still copy the whole auth check here. But again, if else, okay, that's something I need to do here, just in case else. This should all be under else, so you don't accidentally return two values. There we go. That should work better. Else, what I'd want to do is do auth dot or self dot auth, or actually just use the user variable, user dot logout. Let me just confirm that that's the right function. So if we go back over here to the Masonite documentation, look up the authentication piece of the documentation. Should be right here. Yeah, so see auth.logout. So actually not I don't need the user. I would just do auth. So it'll be self.auth.logout. So that would log out the user, and then again I would want to redirect you back to the login page when you log out. Okay, so I just want to make sure I have that in place. Attach this logout function to a route. So I'm going to head over to routes, web.py, where I have all my routes listed. Make another route. Route.post. So again, I attached that create route, that post route here. Actually, this one should be a get route. Okay, and I can just say like, hey, slash logout, and say that was inside the home controller at logout. Okay, there we should have that route. So if we go logout, so let's try that out. So let's do Python craft serve. Oh, I gotta be in the right folder. So cd into, well, no, I guess I gotta turn on the Python environment because my computer froze, so I had to restart it. So the environment's not on anymore. So dot slash Masonite slash bin slash activate. And I gotta use the source command, source. Okay, good. And then I want to cd into project2, because that's what we're working out of right now. And then I can do Python craft serve. Okay, now we're serving. So first thing I want to do is localhost 8000 / login. Okay, so the user should still exist. So if I log in, okay, so that's the home page, which we have an error on, but we'll come back to that. I want to see the logout works. So if I do log out, does it take me back to the login page? Yes, it does. Now let's see here. If I try to go back to /home, it should redirect me back to the login page if this is working. Okay, no, it's trying to do this here. So let's see here. How did I? Oh yeah, because I didn't do this as an else. So it still tries to do the other stuff. Else again. We will alt. There we go. So if I hit refresh, selection object is not sustainable. Self.auth.user. So let's examine something. Let's print user. Okay. Cool. There it is. Object. If I do user dot email, what do I get? Okay, so the user's still logged in. Okay. So that is fine. Although we've confirmed that it is the user object, so I can simplify this over here. I don't need to do necessarily all this. I can just do user.todos. Okay, and then I think this is supposed to be like that. There we go. Okay, so that's working. Okay, and then this is the form, so I can create a to-do. So let's see if I create a to-do. Cheese. Oh, that's right, we have to include the CSS RF token. So we go back to our templates. just to show you what I've done here. Again, we have this auth folder for the auth templates. So what I did is I changed each one to just use the base, the main base, not its own. But more importantly, what we did is theoretically I'm sending over the to-do. So if I go back to that home controller, you'll see here, I'm sending over the to-dos as that second argument to the render function. So saying, hey, use this template with this data. So here I'm looping over those to-dos. And then here is the form, but I forgot to include CSRF, which I need to go back and take a look at the documentation. CSRF protection. So yeah, you got to put in CSRF field here. CSRF field. Okay, and that should fix it going forward. But let's see, if I go back to /logout. Okay, so it takes me to here. But again, I should be logged out, which means if I try to go to /home, it should not let me. But I think it will. It does. Okay. So that's interesting. We'll deal with that in a second. But basically here I have the form to create the to-do. So I should be able to just click here. Oops, I didn't mean to do that, but cheese. Hello. And see, I can create to-dos, so that works. Okay, so they are being added to the database, and they are showing up when I loop over. So that's all working real well. Okay. Now, theoretically, if I log out, which, again, the logout route isn't quite working yet, but what I can do is I can log myself out manually by just going over to my cookies and deleting the token cookie. Okay, so the token cookie is gone. So now if I refresh this, see, it refreshes me back to the login page. Because if I'm not logged in, it's gonna bounce me out. So what I'm gonna do is create a new account. We'll just say alex2 at alexmerced.com, and then again we'll just do AAA exclamation exclamation. Do it again, AAAA exclamation exclamation 11, and then AAAA exclamation exclamation 11. Okay, and then we'll log in with that. We'll say alex2, same password. Okay, I'm logged in. See, all those to-dos from before don't show up. So I want to say why, let's do a couple more of these. Okay, see, so those don't show up, but now if I go log back out, so I'll get rid of that token cookie, refresh, takes me back to the login page, log in with the other account, and see, now I see the older ones. So you see, right now we do have it set up where each user has their own individual things that are unique to them. Only issue is getting that logout to work. So let's go back to authentication. Okay. It says login attempts. You can log out the current user by using user equals auth.logout, which is essentially what I did. So let's go back to the home controller. So now if we go to logout, if the user equals false, if auth.user, you know what? I'll get rid of all this. So unnecessary. Okay, so let's try that again. Log out. Okay, so far so good, but again, that does what it says it's going to do, but now if I go to home, am I still logged out? No, not logged out. ¿Por qué? Current authenticated user. I mean, it takes me back to the login page, which is fine. So if I go create to do, if I go to /logout, I go here and I do Alex2. Let's see here. Yeah, I can switch users, I guess. That works. Cool. Cool. So that works. So essentially what I would do then is like just start adding like buttons on my website so that we can get to the sign up page and just kind of connect everything together. But now you can see like with the built-in authentication, it wasn't that hard to just create this setup so that way users can have their own to-dos. I didn't have to really set up anything with login and sign up. That was kind of all built out of the gate. And then using the relationships, I'm able to grab all the users to-dos really easily. Because basically, since I set up that relationship, all it took for me to get all the users to-dos was this, user.todos. Okay, because I set up that decorator and all that good stuff. Okay, and again, now all the stuff about relationships would be inside the models version of the documentation. So you can see how to set up those relationships. Okay, and then again, setting up authentication, all that stuff is in the documentation. So you have that for reference. But yeah, that kind of wraps this up. Now we'll start getting into like creating an API with Masonite, and we'll put that to a test. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great one. Enjoy.